Hey, this is David Rovix with another episode of Fifth Estate Live, which comes to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. in London. And it goes out. It's well, you can find it at fifthestate.org, and it's archived in the Fifth Estate Live tab there in both video and audio form. You can also find it on my YouTube channel, and if you look for This Week with David Rovix on any podcasting platform, you can find it there as well. And I'm very happy to be spending the hour with my old friend Peter Werbe, who is, in interest of full disclosure, on the Fifth Estate editorial committee and the producer for this show. But he is also, I must say, in all honesty, an amazing novelist, and has just written a novel called Summer on Fire, a Detroit novel. And we're talking about that today for the hour. Peter, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, David. I
And
think you got to, I think you have to write more than one novel before you can be called a novelist.
well, I don't know. You're a very novel novelist. Yeah,
I'm a novelist, yeah.
it's terrible,
Uh,
but it's
yeah.
just. I mean, I guess as a, I mean, in my position as the host of a show that you're producing, I suppose it's like when I go into a studio, the engineers are never supposed to say, "Oh, good song," because they're being paid to be the engineer or whatever. But I'm a volunteer, so I think I can say, this novel is fantastic. I mean, it's
your
such a gripping page turner. What's that?
your hair's getting long.
No, my hair is yeah, I very pandemic. I keep
Mine
on
too.
my daughter
Yeah,
keeps saying she's going to cut it,
yeah.
but she doesn't.
I
And then
actually brought our little dog in for a haircut, and the woman said, "Yeah, I can trim yours." I said, "It's all right. I may never get it cut again. What the hell?
I guess it's the same buzzer would work for the dog or for you, huh?
We're not on the air, are we?
Huh? Oh, we
I'm
are
o-
on the
I'm
air.
only
No,
I'm
we're
only
on the
I'm
air.
only
Good.
kidding. I'm only kidding. We're taking up
They all
valuable.
know about your dog now. If you were trying to hide the fact that you have these cute little dogs.
No, no. So yeah, so I wrote this novel, and I'm pleased so far that people that have read it. We should say, actually, you are the first person to have it read out loud to in September 2019 when you and I visited Marius Mason in prison, and we visited Robcat and Bria in Maine, and we were shooting down a highway, and you said, "Well, read it out loud," and I read it out loud, and I thought, this isn't very good, and you said that's a good idea to read it out loud. You get a sense of how it will sound to the reader.
It
So
makes
it,
such a difference. And
yeah.
did you changed it a lot since then? I mean, didn't
Oh
you?
yeah.
I mean, because I mean that was what I was kind of wishing that I had never heard it in its earlier forms as I was reading it, because it was like just kind of wanted to get all that out of my head, because well, it's just changed so much, but there's still the reminders of what it was before. But like now it's like so much dialogue, and it's, I mean, it's just so funny, and it's so fast moving, and
Well,
it would make such a great film script. But it's also, well, I have a
well,
lot of questions. I have a lot of
let,
questions.
let me say, a friend of mine, Lowell Boileau, wrote a book that you can go to my website, peterwerby, .com or .org, either one. And if you go to books my friends have written, and there's a book that my friend Lowell wrote called Christ of the Cyclone. It's not a religious novel, and and I read it, and I wrote a review of it for Amazon, where he had it published through. And I said it's really pedestrian once you read a book to say, "Oh, this would make a great movie." But I said about his, yeah, it would. We should tell people this book is set in Detroit in 1967, 7 weeks in the summertime, and that's Summer on Fire. Other places had Summer of Love. Detroit had this enormous rebellion, huge demonstrations, fighting fascists. God, what else? Rock and roll, bombings, shootings, um, sex, and then it gets interesting.
I mean, it's all in there, and then the way that, I mean, for people, I was born in 1967, and like a lot of, obviously I know a lot of people of your generation who were actually, lived through the 60s as actual sort of functioning, adults or humans who are not babies, and it's a but so I've heard a lot of people talk about the 60s, obviously is what I'm getting at. But the way that you bring alive the 60s in this book, in 67 in Detroit specifically, in the, on the left and whatever, I mean, what was going on the streets and the Fifth Estate office and I mean, the way that you brought it alive in a novel is just, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I've encountered any other form of bringing that period to life that did it for me as well as this novel did. I mean, maybe it has to do with the fact that I know you and so many of these characters, although the names are different and maybe everything isn't the same as it really. I mean, and okay, that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. How close is the novel to autobiographical? I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
to a large extent, but not completely. I can see
well,
that both.
that's you would think that'd be an easy question to answer, but actually, it's a little hard to. Most things in there, with the exception of the last third, came out of memory of actual events throughout my life, not just in that little period there, but they are so enhanced. The people, the characters, like for instance, a neighbor of ours and a dear friend read a chapter, and she was very helpful just with one little suggestion that affected the writing of the whole rest of the book in terms of the way I use language. But she said, after reading it, "Oh, I didn't know Marilyn could ride a motorcycle." And I said, "She can't. It's fiction."
Right. It's
Right?
fiction.
Yeah. She could kind of look. So I think most everybody's going to take it as autobiographical, and what the hell? Let
Yeah,
them.
I mean, the Marilyn character is a fantastic character anyway. So I mean, if she didn't do all those things, then probably she's not going to be too. I mean, and I should also say I haven't finished the book, so I can and I therefore cannot spoil the ending. So I'm just right in the middle of it.
Can I tell?
But
Can I say one thing about the ending? Maybe this is it has a happy ending.
well, don't spoil it. I mean, but then of course, if you are depicting events that really happened, then they know that the main character survived.
Well, yeah,
So
if you think about so many modern novels, they usually have grim endings. I don't know if you and I were talking. You've read the Overstory by Richard Powers.
no.
Oh God, it's about trees as a sentient community, and
Mm.
they're defenders,
I remember you talking about it.
our
Hmm.
friends.
Hmm.
Earth First and Julia Butterfly and people like that. And well, I'm giving that one away. It doesn't have as happy an ending. That is mine. I mean,
Hmm.
everybody doesn't. It's not a matter of living happily ever after. But the main
It can't all be
characters.
Avatar. The movie Avatar, that was a nice happy ending.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Rush Limbaugh called Avatar the most expensive anti-war movie ever made. I said, that's great.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I totally agree.
one thing I was fearful of is that people, particularly younger people, have had it with the 60s. I've heard once in a while people that are my age, my generation, say, well, in the 60s, and I can just imagine as soon as a person that's 50 or 60 or under goes, oh my God, are we going to get a lecture again? But every apparently the 60s are still, as they say, hot. And I said, wow, I just read a couple more novels recently that they have the Detroit Rebellion of 1967 in it. And I said, it's been covered. And someone said, there's a lot of books about World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's again, it's how you treat everything.
And that's also like, I mean, I think growing up at the period that you grew up, and I think this is also just in the culture, this idea that people of the previous generation liked to tell war stories and that the young generation didn't want to hear them. And I have never known that to be generally the case in society. I mean, maybe in particular families, but I mean, generally the idea that veterans or of any social movement or war really feel the need to talk about it all the time, and that younger people don't want to listen to it. I mean, I just haven't that
Yeah,
dynamic is just it's depicted in movies all the time, but in reality, I think people are very interested in the past.
I know a lot of World War II vets didn't want to talk about it.
They didn't want to talk about it, right? I
No,
mean, the idea
right.
that the number of people who actually want to talk about it, I mean, it's so rare that somebody
Yeah.
actually wants to talk about it, actually, in reality, right?
That reminds me, through my free associative abilities, when you had Ralph Franklin from the Layabouts, and who does a lot of
Mm,
the design for the Fifth Estate magazine, he was talking about his band, the Layabouts, and how. And you said, well, how can you get their music? And it wasn't really clear. Well, here we go. Is that? Let me see. There we go.
there we go. Yes. So the
That's
CD exists.
it
I'm just,
exists,
I'm,
and it
mhm.
exists as a special offer for
Oh,
subscriptions with the Fifth Estate. If you go to fifthestate.org and you go to special offers up on the top bar, you can get it, or you can buy it separately. So it's an additional $5 if you get it with a subscription. If you get it separately, it's 10. And you can get my novel as a
yeah.
special offer as well.
Excellent. Fifthestate.org. You can subscribe to the Fifth Estate. You get the Layabout CD, get Peter Werbe's new novel, and of course, you probably still have a CD player in your car. And novels do
I
not
don't.
require batteries, and
Yeah,
neither does the Fifth Estate magazine.
you should.
And
People should realize by now this is an infomercial.
the nice thing about it is that with all the the laws as they are, it doesn't matter, right? There's
Right,
no
exactly, exactly.
for better or for worse. Yeah, but uh, what? Yeah, it's for me. But Peter, what got you to do the novel in the first place? You could have tried to tell the story of 1967 in so many different ways. What? Why that one?
Let me tell you this. My our IT guy who lives far away says you're not using your headset mic.
Ah,
Is
that
that
sounds like that is
is,
probably an accurate statement. You're hearing me through your headset, but we're probably hearing you through your computer mic. I think
does
your
it sound
IT.
all right?
It's okay. It sounds fine. Yeah, but I think now that your IT guy mentions it, that person is correct.
I
That's what.
I
And I don't,
wonder.
and I mean, there's some kind of setting I mean, on
Sure.
my computer, it's yeah. Well, oh, the
Webcam.
cam mic setting, then audio,
Audio.
and then you have a choice of different
Says microphone
inputs.
webcam, and now it shows it moving. I don't know. Let's. Are
Yeah.
we on the? Are we on the air? Oh yeah. Uh, let's. Let's. What did you ask me? Why did I just? Why did I try to use this novel form to tell this story?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, someone said, why didn't you write a memoir? Well, I don't. Some memoirs are very
Exactly.
interesting, but also you have to be able to. I mean, people say, hey, people make up memoirs too. But I read Penelope Rosemont's recent memoir. She's the one of the foremost surrealists in North America, and she has led an incredible life. Met with some of the original surrealists in Paris in the early 1960s, and she has dates, days, times, addresses, who was in the room. And I read Harvey Oshinsky, who founded the Fifth Estate in 1965. He just wrote a memoir as well. And he's, talks about other parts of his life. Again, he's in the room with people and they're saying what? And I'm thinking, how the hell do they do that? I mean, I would not be able to reconstruct my life. And in many ways, I put this together to not put forth either, my story, which it really isn't, and I didn't put it forth to solely entertain people, although I'm pleased when people like it and find it engaging as a story, but rather ideas. So it is ideas about war and the anti-war movement. It is about racism and its results. It is about the work of Wilhelm Reich and the importance of critiquing why we see these authoritarian personalities so dominant in our society. So I couldn't have written a memoir if I tried. And well, let me say this. A couple of people said that there's too much expository writing in there, meaning that within the action, suddenly there'll be a timeout to describe, I don't know what, the history of a road, but which has real significance later on in the novel. And they said it breaks up the action. And I said, yeah, so what? You know, these are people that could really write. If I hadn't said it so disparagingly, I would say who it was. But a novelist who you've had on the show and who I have great respect for, and in terms of creation of a novel itself, I'm sure she was correct. But if someone came away with something, I didn't want them to come away with the fictional story. I wanted them to come away with the ideas that were embedded in the more expository writing, although it's in the fiction as well.
Whoever that was commenting about the microphone might have been talking about my microphone, incidentally. Can you can still hear me?
Barely now. I don't know what you did.
Oh, really? Okay. What happened? I just changed to.
Well, just ask me a question. I'll fill the gap.
Oh my. Okay.
There you go.
Is that better?
Okay. You're back. You are back.
Oh, good. We're hearing some background music there. Where in your room there?
I know. That's my.
Is that in the other room or through the door? Or? Okay.
Yeah. Let me see. I'll text
We're live. It's live.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's nice background music. You know, it could be on purpose. We could just pretend it's on purpose.
Go ahead. You were going to ask me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in my efforts with memoir writing, I've found that coming up with the dialogue. I mean, that's you can't. I mean, even if you have a good memory for what's happened in the past, trying to remember anything that people said, I mean, is just that they forget.
Sure.
So it ends up being really boring. I mean, whereas if you write a novel and you make stuff up, then you have a lot more leeway to remember or to just. Yeah, I mean, but to capture the tenor of the times is really the key thing, isn't it? Rather than
well, sure. And I mean, I remember I was reading Sterling Hayden's autobiography mainly because he was a sailor around Monhegan Island before he became a movie star, and he's talking about being 16 years old and talking about seeing the smoke wafting up from a chimney. I'm going, he remembers, so it's obviously. It's creative as well. So this has memoir-ish. How would you say that? Memoir-ish aspects to it. I would say I'm just trying to think of something without giving it away. If you want, I mean, I would read something a little.
Do you have a little passage? I mean, as I was reading it too, I was thinking, oh, this would be a good passage, but I don't know if you have any particular. Passage in mind to do a little live reading of.
How long should it be?
I don't know, a few minutes maybe.
All right, let me see. All right, so most of this action is taking place in Detroit in the summer of 1967, right? But at one point, the two main characters, Paul and Michelle, someone said to me, Peter, if you didn't want people to think it was you and Marilyn, why did you call it Paul and Michelle?
Yeah, not much of a departure.
Anyway, so they decided at one point to they were going to go on a road trip, and they go through Canada, and they're entering the United States, and this is incredible. This music.
The background music. I know. I'm not sure. It's not very 60s. I mean, it would be better if it was something from 67. Like from your soundtrack to your book. Where there's a lot of music in the book, and it's not like any of the music we're hearing in the.
Well, let me see. All right, we're gonna. Let me see.
But
hold on.
It's entertaining.
I need you to turn that off. It's too loud. Okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I will tell you this. Though, that there is going to be a soundtrack for the movie. Our friend, our mutual good friend, Andrew Smith, who was on your show a couple of weeks ago, said, wait a minute, you've mentioned 80 songs and musical artists and acts. He's putting together a soundtrack for it.
Oh, great. And it should be a playlist on Spotify, too, I'm afraid to say.
It is.
Oh, good.
He's doing it on Spotify.
Excellent.
On Spotify. And it's going to be on my website. Not now, though. it's not. But it goes from Albert Ayler, the free jazz saxophonist, to Frank Zappa, as you can imagine, with everybody in between. So, all right. So Paul and Michelle are on a road trip, and they're in Canada, which is the way you get to the east from Detroit. And let's see. Soon they're driven through Quebec, and soon they arrived in Woburn, Quebec. It looked just like a little French town, one in which very little English was spoken. Just ahead, pardon me, just ahead was the Coburn Gore border crossing to the United States. Paul and Michelle were used to entering Canada and the States via the traffic clogged bridge or tunnel from Detroit, but this looked like a scene from a spy movie. A single lane led to a small building. Across the road was a black and white striped wooden liftgate raised by a custom agent just as they approached, permitting a car to pass into the U.S. Delighted, Michelle said, "This is so cool. It's like it's like the prisoner of Zenda or something, the back road of a German principality." And Paul said, "At least there's only one car ahead of us." Paul kept the motor running, figuring they'd be at the booth quickly. But as they watched, and then it goes on talking about how they're searching another car in front of them. Paul shut the engine off. I guess, yeah, I can swear, can't I? Of course. This, having done broadcasting for so many decades, it's hard for me to say this, words like this publicly, but I'll go for it. So get the kids out of the room. Paul shut off the engine. Those fucking assholes. People wonder why we're anarchists. Okay, Paul, but when we get up there, be very polite. They are assholes, but they are assholes with complete power over us. Paul said glumly, "I know." So then the other couple moves out. Finally, the couple came out of the building, got back into their green Plymouth Belvedere, and one of the officers lifted the gate for them to enter the land of the free. The other motioned for Paul to advance. "Welcome to the U.S.," greeted them as they pulled to a stop by the officer in front of the gate. His engraved name tag announced he was United States Custom Agent Henry Pattengill. The border outpost he manned was a 7-minute drive from his rented house where he lived with his wife and 3 children. He was 51 years old, 6'1", weighed 210 pounds. His hair, a steel gray butch wax flat top. He wore a Sam Brown belt with matching pearl-handled Colt 1911s cradled in 2 Denax Old West single-rigged fast-draw holsters with the grips facing forward, so he'd have to reach across his body, Buffalo Bill style, to use them. He'd never fired them in his 23 years of service, but he had pulled them several times on recalcitrant border crossings. Perched on his nose was a pair of Ray-Ban aviator-style mirrored sunglasses. When Paul looked at border agent Pattengill, he saw his own reflection in each lens, but distorted by the convex shape like a funhouse mirror. Pattengill inquired, "How are you people today?" Paul and Michelle mumbled they were fine. "Aren't you going to ask how I'm doing?" Paul thought, this isn't going to go well. They responded with the requested pleasantry. Agent Pattengill leaned towards the car and addressed Paul almost confidentially. "I feel so good today that I'm going to give you two a break that I usually don't afford everyone entering our great nation." He smiled and spoke in a sympathetic tone. "Are either of you possessing any contraband, such as illegal narcotics or goods that you're attempting to bring into the United States? If you are and hand them over, I'll just confiscate them and send you on your way." He was lying. Paul and Michelle shook their heads. "You're shaking your heads. I'll take that as a denial. Is that correct?" They nodded their heads vigorously. Paul, seeing his double reflection in Agent Pattengill's Ray-Bans, contorted all the more because of the movement. Why did he look so guilty to himself? "Okay, we're going to have to do this the hard way. Get out of the car," he commanded, the smile disappearing. "Bob," he yelled into the customs building, "call Ingrid. Tell her we need a female search." A startled Michelle yelped, "What?" "Well, you don't want me to do it, do you, little lady?" he said with an ugly grin. Michelle said nothing. He pointed at Paul. "You, come with me," and marched him into a small room in the building. "Well, this won't take long. You're hardly wearing anything. Drop your shorts." Paul did as he was told, seeing no alternative. "Damn, boy, you forgot your underwear. That's all you're wearing? Shorts and a T-shirt? Guess you're not hiding anything on you." He laughed ugly, the kind that come from cops right before they beat the crap out of you. When they walked back outside, Bob was going through their car. He took Michelle's powder blue suitcase and matching vanity and Paul's duffel bag inside and began vigorously going through them. Michelle stood with her arms stiffly folded across her chest. In the meantime, Ingrid arrived, a stern-looking woman around 50 with short graying hair, dressed in a blue Nike tracksuit, who gave no sign of being an official. Come on with me, she ordered Michelle, indicating the building where Paul was searched. Then they did a little bit more of an exchange. Then Ingrid marched out of the building up to Pattengill, followed by a very unhappy Michelle. Find anything on her, Ingrid? Paul wondered, is this his wife? No, Paul, all she had on, was shorts and a t-shirt, not even a bra. Couldn't hide nothing. Pattengill and Bob leered at Michelle's breasts. Ingrid warned her, young lady, are you looking to get raped or something? You can't walk around like that with your boobs hanging out. Michelle looked past her and said nothing. Pattengill and Bob smiled horribly. Bob had their car door open and was sweeping something up from the floorboard. What you got, Bob? I don't know, Hank, some leaves. I want to test them. Bob came back a few minutes later looking disappointed. You need to keep your car cleaner, he scolded the couple. Neither Paul nor Michelle said anything. Agent Pattengill's congenial smile returned. You have passed inspection and are ready to enter the United States. You may return to your car. Michelle opened the passenger door, acutely aware that the two men were still ogling her breasts. As Paul walked around to get in his side, his eyes went to the bumper sticker on their car. Get out of Vietnam, it said in big letters. Fuck, he thought. Agent Pattengill stood by the driver's window and said to Paul, who realized he'd never seen the man's eyes, only his reflection staring back at him. I want to thank the two of you for your cooperation in helping to make Woburn Gore a safe and legal border crossing. Paul stared at his own reflections. Michelle poked him. You're welcome, Paul said, choking out the words. Henry Pattengill nodded graciously as he turned away, ready to inspect the next car in a line that had grown to a dozen waiting vehicles. Next, he barked as Bob lifted the gate. Paul and Michelle headed south to Rangeley and the Wilhelm Reich Museum, a facility to a man whose life work was dedicated to studying the roots of authoritarian personalities. Woo! It was hard to read.
Yeah. I know reading aloud is a whole different thing than writing, but that's a great little border crossing scene there.
So,
and you are tuned to Fifth Estate Live, which comes to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can find all these episodes archived in video and audio form at fifthestate.org. And in podcast form as well, if you look for This Week with David Rovics, wherever you get your podcasts.
And that was a reading from Summer on Fire, a Detroit novel just being published that I wrote, and it's available at fifthestate.org at a special price along with either renewals or subscriptions. Or there's a link if you don't want either. There's a link to or you can just go to my website, peterwerbe.com or .org. So you were asking, so how much of that is true? It was suggested nothing like that ever happened with Marilyn and I, but it happened with another couple and I as we were going through a small border crossing, but nothing quite like that. And there wasn't, so that was heavily fictionalized, but suggested by a real memory and used to describe the power of the state, making people powerless, to humiliate them, to and by having no recourse to an insult, the power over and of sexist approach to them. And in fact, I should have used one of my lines in there about when he crossed the border. I always said, boy, that's enough to make you an anarchist, isn't it?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and I've personally experienced many border crossings that sound a lot like the one you described.
You could write whole novels about your border crossings.
Yeah, those of us who cross borders more often, I guess, are just more likely to have those kinds of experiences, whether you wear underwear or not. Maybe minus that particular aspect to the strip search, but yeah. It's the laughter of the cop before he beats you is a great line. Lots of great lines in there.
There's
Although there's so many lines in so many little parts in the novel where I was just really cracking up. I mean, there's
uh,
so much funny stuff going on in there, and that was not necessarily an example of some of the funniest parts. But then again, I don't know how much of it is subjective in a matter of just like who's the reader and what their which parts I was laughing out loud at. Which is maybe not the same parts that other people would. But one of the things that I remember talking a lot about a couple years ago when you were working on this was how much to use description of places, events, and people that you're introducing us to. And I feel like you just you just nailed it with the not with the final result here in terms of description.
hmm.
I mean, the amount of description you have is like it just makes me hungry for more, and then it's over, and then there's more action, which is, yeah, it seems to me that in terms of the pacing, it's just like always exciting, but you're putting things into enough context that I don't think you need to be too familiar with events of the time to be following anything.
Well, I'm also curious how people who don't live in Detroit relate to it, because you should be able to write a novel about, Minneapolis or Sacramento and have it, be compelling. I recently read a book called Grand River and Joy, which are two streets and an intersection in Detroit, and it also treats the Detroit Rebellion of 1967 in a much different way, but. There's a there's a woman. This woman is at a meeting with six other women, and she describes pages of everything they're wearing, how they're wearing their hair, the food on the table, the assortment of pastries, and so. My book, if I would have done that, it would have been, instead of 260 something, it would have been 460 pages.
There's somebody, Mighty Joe Nolan is watching on Twitter, and
Hi, Joe.
Joe's wondering about your other accounts, books, films about the Detroit uprising and what they got right and wrong in your view.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to. There's going to be the book launch. You're getting the first everything. You have the first reading. Personally, you have the first reading on a medium, and where are we going with this? You had something else that was first. Bring this back to me. This is why I used to be on the air with Jolene Jordan, and she would
Because she
she
could
would
always
she'd
remember
remind
what's
me
going on.
what the hell we were talking. Oh yeah, how did they yeah. There's going to be a book launch at Source Books in Detroit, which is primarily an Afrocentric bookstore, but it's very welcoming, as you can tell by the fact that they're going to have me there. And one thing that occurred to me, most of the books are written by white people, such as myself, about how we experience this fundamental Black experience. The 1967 Detroit Rebellion. And I feel remiss and those, Joe, those are all pretty good as far as I'm concerned from the white perspective. How Black people viewed it, and I got to believe that I am just remiss in not knowing what books are out there written by African American writers in which they treat that. There's a great in The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. What was that, from the late 30s or early 40s, where it ends in a Harlem riot. I mean, that's over the top, in a classic book to read.
That's, I mean, that's there's so many events and people in history that have just not been written about hardly at all in any form, right? And so, I mean, when you mention that maybe you just don't know what books were written by Black people about the overwhelmingly Black experience of the uprising. I mean, yeah, it's just, I mean, what just comes to my mind is just how there's just so much history that just has basically gone kind of unwritten about.
Well, think about Peter Cole, who you just interviewed.
Exactly.
Who wrote the biography of Ben Fletcher.
No one's written a song about Ben Fletcher. for example?
Who could do that? Who can just knock those songs right out?
I'm
Well,
working on it, but nobody's done it yet.
yeah. Well, Ben Fletcher was a black wobbly around, the late teens. He was sentenced to prison along with other IWW members. And one of the things that's all through it is calls where there's so little record of him. That he probably did this and he must have done that. Although other people wrote a lot about him, and that's a lot what's in Peter's book. I mean, I'm supposed to do a review of it for this coming issue of the Fifth Estate. But yeah.
That also, I mean, reading Peter's book, which is another amazing book, full of first, source materials, right? And I mean, it just makes me think that, of course, you'd want to write a historical novel about something like Ben Fletcher because there's so little to go on, so you might as well want to make it up. But of course, there's also something to be said for just trying to present to us what is actually really known. But the novel, I think what about the can we talk about the other aspects of the novel writing process, like other than the actual book itself? Like, okay, so now you've written a novel, and in 2021, in this content drenched context of the modern internet, where even trying to get anybody to read something longer than a tweet it seems like a impossible task. What is it like trying to? I mean, you've just done it, so I don't know. There's maybe not much to talk about yet, but putting out a novel during the pandemic in 2021, when I think the number of people who actually read novels in any form is way, way down compared to like 20 or 30 years ago.
Oh,
And
sure.
and it's not like ebooks have replaced novel reading. People don't read ebooks either. I've done 3 interviews with Ramsey Kanan with PM Press. So we've talked a lot about these dynamics.
Was there a question there?
Yeah. What's your plan in terms of
distribution?
in terms of getting any kind of an audience, any kind of traction writing? I mean,
well,
you've got a lot of background with actually having an audience in various forms.
That's where it is, because it is decidedly unfair. The other, you had our another Fifth Estate writer, Fran Shore, on, who written a book called Passages of Rebellion, and Lowell Boileau, he wasn't on, but a friend, and he's had stuff in the Fifth Estate. You should have him on. Put on my producer's hat, and yet they're not well known. Whereas since I was on the radio for decades, there are people out there, and plus, being rooted in the city for so long, in the activist movements, and being fairly known, there's an initial real response to it. And I mean, I don't know what people think press runs are of books, but bestsellers, I mean, if you sell 100,000 novels in a nation of 360 million people, you're doing okay. So the first press run of this is 1,000. And I'm used to, the Fifth Estate that prints thousands. I'm used to broadcasting to tens of thousands. And this was more work than all my broadcasts and good numbers of the hundreds of articles that I've written for the Fifth Estate. And I'm thinking, and there's going to be 1,000 books out there. But that's life. That's the form that myself and the other writers chose. And I have a lot of media contacts, and I'm going to be doing more interviews. And we have the Fifth Estate available, through which we're offering the book as a special subscription and renewal offer. So that's an advantage. And could you call it unfair? Let's not. Let's just call it an advantage that I have that my fellow comrades and friends don't have. Which I mean, I don't know what to say. That on my at my website, peterwerbe.com, there's a page that's called Books That My Friends Have Written. So I've tried to, write or try to list, I don't know, about 10 books, everybody from Wayne Kramer, the lead guitar of the MC5, to David Watson's, what do they always say, seminal Against the Mega Machine, Penelope Rosemont's. I'm forgetting the name of it now. Just recently published memoir on surrealism. So, I mean, I want to try to, you know, give as much push to my friends' works as possible because they're, if I don't know how valuable mine are, but I know theirs are. You know.
And you know, it seems like there's a lot of people writing their novel these days. I don't know if that's just increased during the pandemic, or I guess it has probably. But have you read many other novels that people have written that are basically based in memoir type experiences, and thought about how you wanted to do it differently, or pitfalls you were trying to avoid in writing it yourself?
Not really. You know, I was uh, there was one publishing firm wanted to edit it, but they weren't going to bring it out for like a couple of years, and they said they were going to cut out most of the expository writing because they said again it interfered with the flow of the action and all that. But one of the interesting things about this, remember last week Ralph Franklin talked about the Cass Corridor community and how we created all these autonomous projects and they were done in a cooperative manner. Well, that's the way this was. I mean, as always, you know, the person, if it says Summer on Fire by Peter Werbe, you know, who's the star, who gets to be on, you know, the Fifth Estate Live program, me. But if it would have been just me, it probably wouldn't have happened. And if 5 or 6 people hadn't read it, it would have been crap. And if Ralph Franklin hadn't designed the interior and both covers, it wouldn't have been attractive. And if Lorraine Perlman of Black and Red Books hadn't agreed to publish it and has done so much supportive work. So this
And if the Detroit uprising had never happened, you'd have nothing to write about.
Right, exactly. Well, we should tell people though that's not, you know, that's like
no, it's a lot more than that. But if the '60s had never happened, then you'd have
yeah, exactly. Well, I got another one in mind, but
do you have another book in mind? Are you thinking of writing another?
I thought, why I must be a glutton for punishment. But here's what do you think about this? The character in this, Paul, and his friend Jeff, who you probably came across at the beginning, they go on a Venceremos cane cutting brigade to Cuba. They get disillusioned with it. They wind up they kind of go AWOL, and they wind up in Havana, and they're looking for the address of the anarcho-syndicalist headquarters, union headquarters in Havana. Now, the anarcho-syndicalists survived the Spanish colonialists, they survived Machado and the dictators, but Castro wiped them out. You know, the presence, the historic presence of our comrades in Cuba, gone. So Paul and Jeff are standing in front of it, and an older man, kind of 60s, comes up to him and starts talking. He finds out that they're both anarchists as well, and they draw him in to a plot to assassinate Castro. And Paul says the first thing is, wait a minute, that's what the CIA is trying to do. So it goes on from there. It strikes me, I'm thinking somewhat of Stuart Christie, the late Stuart Christie's experience of his involvement in a plot to assassinate Francisco Franco, the dictator of Spain, where he got caught as part of it in, I think, 1962. So is it a hit or is it a miss? What are you going to say? No, forget it, Pete.
No, well, how much of that hit or a miss? I mean, depends on how it's done, doesn't it? I mean,
Sure.
You know, it seems
well,
like
you got it all. You've got it all so far.
Yeah. Loads of potential. I mean, there's this stuff that, I mean, what always strikes me about these real life stories like that is how they would make great novels or great films, and how rarely such things are ever made into films. I mean, obviously, you know, the narrative that they want to present to us in Hollywood, there's certain kinds of history that needs to be made into films, and other kinds of history that needs to be, you know, studiously ignored. But as I'm reading your book, it just, I mean, I guess this probably, you know, jumps out at people who are reading any fast-moving, interesting, action-packed book, but I mean, the screenplay potential, the movie potential is just all over the place. It's like from the first page.
Well,
is that Is that as you're writing it, are you thinking screenplay too? Because I mean, a lot of people just are when they're writing a novel. They're I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows? What's I don't know what's
Well,
realistic,
let's see.
what's not realistic. I mean,
I
movies
don't.
are expensive to make, and there's a
Well,
lot of them being made.
I got a friend that makes grade B horror movies, and also Bonnie. Are you watching this? She's a screenwriter in Los Angeles. Who knows? But listen, we've only got about 14 minutes here. Can I direct this a little?
Sure.
He didn't pay any attention to the questions that I sent him. Uh, you were you were going to ask me how come it says no copyright, Pete?
Oh yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, and I'm that partly I'm and partly I think it's an interesting question, but also I want to get your reaction as well. You know, everybody copyrights their material. Right at the beginning on the information page, it says no copyright. So what does that say? Well, it's partly a political statement. As an anarchist, it says I am not engaging the political state to protect my private property. Okay, and there's actually footnotes that are going to be published online on my website with this. Just and it's not they're not needed to explain the story, but it will explain why, for instance, there's no copyright. I would be pleased as hell if some publisher somewhere said, "Oh, this is a great story. It says no copyright. Let's print another edition of this." Fine, because I'm not in it to realize a profit. Freddie and Lorraine Perlman, who founded Black and Red Books, I don't think I can put this together. They'd say this book was not put together by people seeking wages in the publishing industry or profits from its sale. They were doing it as a volunteer project to propagate the ideas, and that's what I've been all my life, a propagandist in the best sense of the word. But however, somebody like Kara Hoffman, who's an incredible novelist, and probably just shakes her head when she looks at my writing, she's such an elegant writer. She's just amazing. And she was been on, I think, on your show
Mm-hmm.
a couple of times. And so she derives an income from it. So her books sell well enough that if it said no copyright, anybody can reproduce it. Someone would say, hell yeah, let's do it and make money off of it. Whereas I couldn't care less. So, and the other thing is, although I don't know if they would do it, because there was a convention I think in 1988, where it was determined publication equals copyright. So even though it says no copyright, mine's copyright. And if Random House said, "Oh, this is great. David Rovics is absolutely correct about what a great novel this is," and it says no copyright, we're just going to. They would never do that. They would write to me and say, "We need you to sign off on this, or we're not going to do it," and they wouldn't do it. So it's safe.
Yeah.
So are your songs copyrighted?
Yeah, they're all. I mean, it's a very complicated question. I think for any kind of producing any kind of content these days, because if you want to get any royalties in any form, like for music, then you have to have them have it copyrighted. But at the same time, you can also register stuff Creative Commons to try to make it easily available for people who are trying to use music or writing for purposes that aren't about making money. But it's a big complicated question.
Well, I didn't mean this in any way judgmental of anybody that copyrights their material. I was saying just for me, somehow I think though some people feel that it makes them official. I'm not talking about you, but I mean people.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people when people used to typewrite little chat books, and they would just type the word "C" and then with pen. I don't know why they wouldn't use parentheses. Write like Ipana toothpaste or something was going to steal their little doggerel. They would. So
The
you're
idea that for people to care about it oftentimes is a little, bizarre. I mean, the number of times like somebody will write me and say, I wrote this song and I haven't copyrighted it yet, and so I'm like kind of worried about somebody stealing it, but like don't worry, it's not going to happen. It's not, it's
Well, look at some of those lawsuits against different bands. I mean, the most famous being, well, now the most famous one is probably Led Zeppelin and Spirit with Stairway to Heaven, which I listened to the Spirit song and I said, oh my God, that's exactly the arpeggio. Is that it? Does arpeggios go up as well as
right,
down?
right, yeah,
Or,
yeah, both, yeah,
yeah,
both.
up. I mean, that's the identical one. And the jury found no, but with George Harrison and is it My Sweet Lord and You're So Fine? I'm thinking, what? And and you're not talking about super complicated music, right? I mean, and you get tunes in the back of your brain, and those I'm sure that spills out. But with printed word, I mean, it's a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the question of like, what is original and what who should be making money and all that. I mean, that's where it gets so complicated, right? I mean, of course you're writing about events that happened. You didn't make any of that up necessarily, and you didn't make up the English language, and but of course it's original. It's an original novel. You put a lot of work into it, So, but I think that the whole question of like when we're writing songs that sound like other songs, well, none of us invented these chord progressions. They were invented thousands of years ago, probably tens of thousands of years ago. So it's a question of like, we're all standing on the shoulders of others. And, but then if Bob Dylan did not copyright those traditional songs that he recorded, then the record companies would have made the money.
Sure.
So it's not like traditional or anonymous is an entity that can make the money. So a lot of artists would copyright stuff, and then later you look at it and you're like, well, is he trying to say he wrote that traditional song? Well, no, nobody was actually claiming they wrote those traditional songs. They're just taking credit for it because somebody has to make the money. So
Well,
it's
speaking of Cuba, and I think other maybe North Vietnam as well, for a while they were printing copyrighted material without any royalties given, and those authors obviously were well known enough that they were deriving income from it. Whereas, like I say, if some printer in Texas or some publisher in Texas printed my novel, I'd write them and say thank you. But it's a like I say, this is
yeah,
not an income producing venture. Did I have more questions? Didn't I? I gave you a whole bunch of you, ignoring them all.
well, we actually did talk about some of those questions that you think I'm ignoring, but one of them was the question of the memoir
Oh,
versus the novel. I think
well,
you only sent me 3 questions, so that you.
oh, I forgot. I was going to send more. Yeah, I forgot. But there a couple of things. There are some people. There are a number of characters come close. They're all an amalgam, including one that people swear is me, the Paul character. But they're all an amalgam of people, and a couple of them, I thought I didn't think these people had any idea that I didn't have any idea that they were still around or they had any contact with me. And I get these emails from say, oh, I heard you're writing a novel. I'm going, oh my God. And I actually went in and changed the name because I had the same first name of some people. And one person has read it and didn't recognize his character, which is good. And I'm worried about one other. I mean, because they're not negative characters, but they're a little kind of portray them as a little sort of on the sad side. But Thomas Wolfe, the first Thomas Wolfe who wrote "You Can't Go Home Again,"
Mm.
although that book was published posthumously in 1940, the people in his town were outraged at because he it was like Kerouac. He barely changed the names. When he like on the road, like Kerouac. In fact, the first manuscripts of On the Road, he had all his buddies' names in there, and then he I don't know whether he decided to change them or the publisher did, but it was pretty evident. But
Yeah, I mean, when Mark Twain wrote his memoir, he didn't publish it until 100 years after his death.
really,
which I mean, which obviously means you don't get to find out what anybody thinks of the thing, and it's a very, very long. It just was published a few years ago, right? And it's a very long. There's an audiobook version too. It takes like 16 hours.
Well, the strong characters that are in it may recognize themselves, and they're portrayed positively, and
Yeah,
and some of well in the footnotes there is one where the Jeff character does some antics, which was an old friend of mine who passed away, and it in the footnotes it will tell who it is.
when they passed away, that makes it easier to talk about their crimes.
Well, one of the things I found, I used the real name of a judge, and I found out because I use the Associated Press style book and libel guide, and it says dead people cannot sue. You can't. I mean, it seems kind of weird.
Can't sue on behalf of somebody's estate for libeling the dead.
In other words, if Gaia forbid, passed away, and I wrote something, you were a thief and a crook and a rapist and all that, your survivors had no recourse. That seems kind of crazy, but that's what it says. So I use the real judge's name because he was a pig and a half a MFer,
So somebody
sends John Sinclair to 9.5 to 10 years in jail for two joints. The famous.
That judge. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
One of the viewers on YouTube says here in Italy, one of the major contemporary writers also has a copy left clause on their work when they publish, apparently.
Well, as I said, that's mostly in there as a statement, because I think as soon as people say no copyright, I think people go, huh? Because that's where it says copyright 2021. So, I try to put as many provocations in everything as I can.
I mean, the possibilities for things to be used when they're not copyrighted in more potentially different ways. It seems like was that one of the reasons? Like there's who knows what might be done with it if it's not copywritten. That would be much more difficult to do because of the issues with distributing royalties and all that.
Well, if you're distributing royalties, I guess that is a consideration. There won't be any here. If there's any profit on this, it will go to my publisher, Black and Red, and they'll use that to print more books, which is fine. Like I say, I didn't do this to secure wages. Which, that actually has a negative connotation to it, and I don't mean it like that. And it's if I'm positioned comfortably, it makes it sound like I'm being judgmental, and I'm not. If you need to do it for what you want to get out of it, then for sure do it. In the Fifth Estate, there's a K sign, which it looks like it says "Kopai Mai," but actually it says "Copy Me." So we invite people to, and we don't. And people always say, "We'll be sure to give you credit." No, we don't care.
And the layabouts also they never wanted to play for money. They would be always, when there was money involved with their gigs, they'd always be giving it away to different causes. There's the layabouts. And speaking of the layabouts, if you subscribe to the Fifth Estate, you can now get a very steeply discounted layabout CD, as well as Peter Werbe's new novel, Summer on Fire, a Detroit novel, which you can also find at peterwerbe.com and at fifthestate.org. You can see a nice little picture of it as well. And you can also get these discussions as well. Yeah. Hurry up and relax, the layabouts. Is that what? No, Workers of the World, relax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it says down there, work, no. Dance, yes. With those little stick figures. I love that. Yeah.
And a brilliant live band too. And there's only one video on YouTube of them performing. And I don't know. There's this whole, I mean, we're running, well, we only got a minute, right? But this whole question of, putting out, playing for free and putting out material for free, as opposed to, being part of the, trying to make a living, it's also, we could talk about that for hours. There's a lot of, but that subject with Ralph was also interesting.
Anybody that's judgmental about this question means they're not in the position of needing an income. So it's an arrogance then if they are judgmental. Yeah. So
Yeah, or I guess there's the people who are judgmental of those who would ever write anything without charging for it, because then there's all the journalists who are trying to make money, etc. I mean, there's this whole
sure.
question of, in the collapsing industry, how do we deal with it? But
You need a producer, man.
I need a producer.
I never was in the full screen, was I?
Yeah, no, you were in there
There you
most
go.
of the
There
time.
you go.
Most of the time, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Although now I've got the
Now we got the glare
glare.
back, but
Yeah.
no, I need 3 producers. I need
Right.
audio, visual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Peter, it's been a pleasure talking
Well,
to
it's
you.
great. Great. And who do we have next week? The producers should know.
Oh, good idea. My producer is named Peter. Does he know? We'll hear about it.
We'll keep it as a surprise.
Good.
All right. Love you, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. All right. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this discussion with Peter Werbe, who is, in fact, the producer for Fifth Estate Live, which comes to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And Peter was the guest of this hour specifically because he's got a wonderful, wonderful new novel out called Summer on Fire, a Detroit novel, which you can, again, find at fifthestate.org, peterwerbe.com. And you can also hear these interviews all archived in video and audio form at fifthestate.org, and also as a podcast if you look for This Week with David Rovics, wherever you get your podcasts. And I will be back sometime soon to do more interviews. I'm not sure exactly when. Probably next week will be the next one on Tuesday. And until then, remember, trust your neighbors. Mutual aid will get us through. Bye for now.